South Korea is a high-tech hub and one of the most advanced industrialized countries in the world. But just 40 kilometers from its capital lies the backward and belligerent North Korea, which seems intent on stepping up its nuclear program despite condemnation from the UN and new international sanctions.
We really hope that North Korea would behave more, normally. But from North Korean point of view, whenever there is a threat to Kim Jong-il's regime security and national security, their response becomes extremely hysterical.
Surprisingly, perhaps, North Korea's provocations didn't feature prominently in discussions at the World Economic Forum on East Asia held in Seoul. South Koreans, at least, have become inured to Pyongyang's threats, and the focus among foreigners here was on how Asia can best dig itself out of the current economic crisis.
The North Korean issue has become really headache to the countries in the region because now all of countries in Northeast Asia are encountering financial crisis in its aftermath. And therefore there got to be some kinds of a greater degree of security cooperation so that we can pay greater attention to the management of economic and financial crisis.
The risks to security come just as the region appears to be returning to economic stability. The World Bank has raised China's growth forecast to 7.2%. Other countries with large domestic economies, such as Indonesia and the Philippines, are also expected to expand this year. Asia accounts for 35% of the world's GDP, compared to 20% each for the US and Europe. Asia also has 6 countries among the G20, giving the region an unprecedented leadership role. People here believe time has come for Asian leaders to seize the moment and refocus their economies.
The old model, which was essentially that Asia overproduced and the West overconsumed, has been proved to be unsustainable. And there will be a need for a rebalancing of the global macroeconomy, with Asia consuming more and the West saving and investing more.
We've got to start rebalancing our economies, which means we've got to start depending on our own domestic markets, national and regional, rather than only exports.
Southeast Asia's ASEAN trading bloc alone represents a market of some 600 million people, with China on its doorstep. Delegates discussed that region's potential and the emergence of new growth models there, including special economic zones, capitalizing on greater regional integration. The head of Malaysia's state investment arm pointed to the success of a new zone in the south of that country.
A development like one of our special zones, for example, Iskandar, Malaysia, at the southern tip of the peninsula Malaysia, next to a major international hub like Singapore, I think is particularly well placed to capture some of those changes in the global environment.
The zone has weathered the economic crisis well, managing to attract over $12 billion of investment since 2007, 90% of its 5-year target.
If you don't have the local demand, then we will have an issue. In the context of Iskandar, Malaysia, we see that the local demand is actually quite significant. Therefore, it actually helps us to go through.
Companies including Legoland, GE, and Newcastle University are investing in this special zone, which is targeting sectors such as high-tech manufacturing, education, medical and financial services, and creative industries. And it's playing on its position at the geographic heart of the region.
That will have to be the nature of the game in the future. Asia has to become much more integrated. I think we've got to look at Asia as a whole, a market and a production center, and therefore projects like this will increasingly become normal or common.
Malaysia will not be alone in its efforts to broaden its economic base and move up the value chain. There is a growing sense that this region has turned a corner, and while it can't afford to turn its back on the forces of globalization that dragged it into this crisis in the first place, East Asia will need to strengthen its economic integration if it's truly to take a leadership role When the world emerges from the downturn,